Hello and welcome. What harm is the growing availability of pornography doing to physical and emotional relationships between men and women? The rapid rise of internet gonzo or extreme porn has made it easy to access, but some believe it's increasingly dehumanizing women and desensitizing men. Studies show that on average, boys view porn for the first time from the age of 11, adversely affecting the way they grow to view sex and women later in life. Those who want to counter the effects of strong pornography face a powerful and growing business that is now estimated to be worth more than $96 billion, rivaling the revenues of all major Hollywood studios combined. It's a far cry from the 1950s when porn was limited to the much softer offerings of Playboy centerfolds on magazine stands. So today we ask, how does pornography change the way couples relate to each other emotionally and physically? Remember, you can call in with your questions and comments, and we also welcome your SMS or emails onto the show. Joining me to discuss this is Gail Dines, a professor of sociology and women's studies at Wheelock College in Boston. Her latest book, Pornland: How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality, focuses on how explicit porn is affecting today's society. Dr. Dines, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. Now, how has it come so far? How has it changed so much as an industry? Why has porn become so much stronger and so much more all-pervasive?
Well, the answer to that, of course, is the internet. The internet changed it. It made it accessible, it made it affordable, and it made it anonymous. Now, those are the three things you need to increase porn use. Before the internet, a boy or a young man would have to go to find his father's Playboy. He'd have to go to a porn shop, which was difficult given his age. Today, it's constantly there, and the more it's there, the more men are using it. And the more they use it, the more desensitized they become, so the harder and harder the pornography has to get. So that's basically, in a nutshell, exactly what has accelerated the porn industry today.
Now, you say in your book that boys as young as 11 start to see hardcore pornography and that it starts to affect their psyche negatively. What evidence have you managed to collect of that?
Well, certainly my interviews with young men, and I constantly get emails from young men telling me that they started pornography very young. A lot of them are very anxious and nervous because they can't get away from it. They've become habitual users. They tell me that they have a hard time developing intimate relationships with women, that often they prefer the pornography to real women because the pornography is kind of industrial strength sex, and real sex with a human being looks kind of boring and banal next to pornography. It also says that they need pornography. They need to conjure up the images from pornography in order to stay aroused when they're with their partners. So it's having a really profound effect on the way that they develop intimate relationships with women.
What is the difference that you found on the impact it has on men versus women?
Well, there's been actually very few studies done on women. At this point, we don't really know how pornography affects women. What I can say, and what I have found from my interviews with women, is that the main effect of pornography on women is that they date men who use pornography. And they feel that these men often manipulate or coerce or seduce them into performing what is actually porn sex. And because this culture has become pornified, everywhere you go, you see the message that pornography is okay, it's fun, it's fantasy. When they don't feel comfortable with this, they have no validation from the culture outside to say, no, I don't want to do this. This doesn't feel comfortable. This doesn't feel right for me.
Now, I know you say in the book you get a mixed response from people you talk to. I want to put an email to you that we got from Bangladesh, from Michal Ahmed. Michal wrote in saying, porn's influence on human relationships is exaggerated. It does not overtly impact a couple's life. When you get that kind of response, how do you respond to that?
Well, there's no studies that show that that's true, actually. Studies show that when a woman finds out that her husband has been using pornography, and often they use it in secret so that these women discover it on their computer, they feel like they've been betrayed. They feel like he's having an affair. And I can tell you, so many women write to me talking about the fact that their marriage is actually destroyed or their relationship is destroyed through their partner's use of pornography. Now, of course, that's not every man who uses pornography, and that many men use pornography and they do maintain relationships. But what we're talking about are patterns that we're now seeing from habitual use of pornography.
One viewer wrote in from Morocco, Abdul Latif, who wrote in saying this: pornography destroys the intimacy of relationships by introducing sexual violence. This is why uncontrolled sexuality tends to become more compulsive and obsessive. Does that basically agree with what you found as well?
Well, yeah, what's interesting about the new pornography, and what's very important here and why I wrote this book, was to really alert people to the fact that pornography has changed so substantially over the last 15 to 20 years. Gone are the sort of softcore images, because today, really, softcore pornography has migrated into pop culture. So what you're left with is the more hardcore, the more brutal, the more body punishing. And when you look at it, it does look like acts of violence against women. It feels like they're being sexually assaulted. And even though they say, of course, I love it, I want more, harder, harder, when you really watch what's going on, when you watch their faces, you can see these women are very uncomfortable and often in pain.
Now, you know, it's interesting that, you know, this idea that pornography dehumanizes women is a fairly well-established one, but you feel it's become much, much worse. And I know that you don't like the way the industry constantly uses the term girl. Explain that to me.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? It wasn't
Yeah,
very
sure.
clear.
Yeah, the way the industry uses the word girl as opposed, you know, there's reference to girl, there's constant word, you know, girls going wild, that kind of thing.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, they very rarely call women girls, and I can't repeat on the air what they do call women. What they tend to do is call them really vile names, way worse than girl. And what that does is it adds to the dehumanization, because what's very important when men looking at pornography is they do not relate to the woman as a human being, because that could really derail the pornography experience. Because if they look at her face, if they see what's really happening to her, you know, one woman, three men penetrating every orifice, calling her vile names, they could have some empathy towards her, and that empathy could really derail the porn experience.
You know, an email that came in from Ghana from a viewer by the name of Muntaka Ghana says, why is porn considered to be solely degrading to women? There are two genders involved and no one is forced to watch or participate.
Well, that's true. No one is forced to watch or participate, although we have to talk about a very sophisticated industry that's out marketing to young men. But I think the really important thing to realise about pornography is that you need never look at pornography to be influenced by it, because we live in, I say, as a porn culture. I mean, many of the women I interviewed never looked at pornography, but they are incredibly influenced by it because of their boyfriends and partners and husbands who are using pornography. And I think that porn dehumanises men as well. It reduces men also to their penis. It tells them they're not really human. It tells them they have no empathy, no morality, no sexual boundaries. So I would agree. I think it really debases men as well.
Now, it's interesting. You're saying how it's become much worse and the desensitization has occurred. I had an interesting experience years ago when I was filming a documentary in Amsterdam, and one of the things, obviously, there is the huge the porn industry, or at least the sex industry is very big in Amsterdam. And I was walking past a shop in the red light area where we were going to film, which had everything exposed in the window. It was early one morning. We were just looking at the area, and everything was on display. It wasn't blacked out, it wasn't hidden in any way. And I noticed a woman walking a young child past this shop where everything was on display. And I asked the person working with us from Amsterdam who lived there, a young man, I said, you know, don't parents get offended when they take their children past this kind of place? He said, actually, us growing up here, we've learned to ignore it. It's there all the time. It doesn't have any interest or attraction, you know, for us. And I wonder if things might end up going full circle, that this becomes so available that ultimately people will then start to ignore it because it isn't, you know, mysterious or sensual in any way anymore.
Well, actually, I don't think the studies are showing that. The studies are showing it's getting much more, men are becoming much more habitual users. Some use the word addicted. Now, I used to be really suspicious of the sense that men got addicted, because I thought it was men not taking responsibility for their porn use. But in fact, when you speak to therapists, you're hearing increasingly that their offices are full of men who are indeed addicted. So I don't think this genie is going to go back in the bottle all by itself. I think we're going to have to do something as a society to decide that we want to deal with this onslaught of pornography.
Okay, we've got a caller on the line from Norway. Hassan, thanks for joining us. What would you like to ask?
My question is that I think the idea of pornography was fine in many parts of Western countries, and it's affecting their kids and their children. Now they have realized that this is a disease and this is a shame for them. So why did they take steps before? And
that's an interesting point, Hassan. Dr. Dines, I guess the question that's coming from Hassan is, why has society in the West in particular, as he puts it, let things get so bad? Why hasn't anyone spoken out or tried to do something about this before?
Well, I think the pornographers have done a stealth attack on our culture. I think that a lot of us were asleep at the wheel, that we didn't see what was happening. I mean, I only really realised what was going on through some of my students talking to me and telling me their experiences. I think it's taken us by surprise, and I think we need more people out there speaking about this, because we need to treat this as a major public health issue. And what you do with public health is you have education campaigns. And often, you know, the pornography industry has a very well-oiled resource machine, and what they can do is have their PR are out there, and they have sold this image that pornography is fun, it's playful, it's harmless, and in fact, if you speak up against it, you are prude. So I think many people are scared of speaking out against pornography for getting labelled anti-sex or prude.
Now, we've got a caller on the line from the West Bank. Chris, thanks for being with us. What would you like to ask?
Hello, I'd like to offer a comment if I could.
Mm-hmm.
I have dealt with people personally who have the problem of addiction to pornography, and it is as destructive as addiction to alcohol or cocaine. This destroys people's lives socially, it destroys their finances, and there's one solution to a lot of it that the porn industry is fighting tooth and nail against, which is quite simply, if it were required for internet porn sites to have a different suffix, .xxx, for example, instead of .com,
right,
so they could all be blocked out at one fell stroke, it would make it so much easier for these people who we really should help, because they are fighting with this the way alcoholics fight with alcohol.
Dr. Steins, a quick comment on that, that if it was far more easily labelled, in the sense of, as Chris was saying, if it could be marked with a suffix on the internet so that it's very easy to target it, for example, to block it from children and so on, would that help?
No, I don't think it would help. I think it would just be an easier place to get to. And I'll tell you the truth, the porn industry, like any other industry, does not want to be marginalised. They will absolutely fight this tooth and nail.
All right, we're going to get back on that subject. We're going to take a very short break. When we return, how big business is making big money from the growing influence of pornography. We'll be right back.